I think a strong an import broker relationship really consists of trust and being able to have guidelines paved out for them, such as SOPs, escalation paths, some background in terms of the product itself.
I will say that everybody has been up and down with the tariff talks and all that, but then now I think people need to be as tired as they are and frustrated as they are. Lalo, I think there are opportunities now that are finally beginning to pop up, and you know, business leaders need to start looking forward to taking advantage of some of the trade deals that are either in negotiations or have been finished and all that. But it is a taxing time for the logistics, compliance, and sourcing folks right now, because they're getting yanked 6 ways from Sunday, aren't they?
It is, yeah, and I'm so happy that we've highlighted on some of the recent shows folks that address different aspects of the trade world, let's call it. You know, we had the folks over from IB&M talking about bonds and, you know, their surety. It's certainly keeping everybody on their toes and you know, just making sure that the trade keeps flowing.
Mm-hmm. Well, with that, I will say that, you know, some of the things of going back, trying to look at your relationships with your vendors, trying to get information. The bar's been raised on certain information that's got to be supplied, or on the back end for audits. Is how do you know that this is made without forced labor? How do you know that this is the country of origin? You can have a completed widget, if you will, that has components in it that come from different countries. That is a whole nother level, instead of just the substantial transformation of goods now changes the country of origin, not necessarily changes duty rates. So it has been a challenge with that. I will say our guest today is going to be somebody that's going to be, giving some thought, I think, that everybody needs to listen to, not only from the compliance side, but especially from corporate leadership, company leadership, and whatnot, on some importance here on certain relationships. But why don't you introduce our guest?
Sure. I'm of the kind that likes to just go in, like in LinkedIn, and whenever something pops up there that people are pretty active or are offering really good advice or just information, I like to reach out to them and see if they can come on our show. And that's the case here with our next guest, Diane Perez. Diane, I've been following her for a while, and then I finally asked her to connect with me, and then so we got to talking, and I got her, as you now can see, on the show. But I like that. So Diane comes from a really interesting background. She's worked both sides of the coin, let's call it. She's worked the importer side, and she's also worked the brokerage side. So she brings that knowledge and perspective in there. Right now, she's currently the senior trade manager over at Aura. In case y'all don't know, you can look that up. But Aura is like a ring that you wear. It's a smart ring. But she's also been at places like Amazon, Pratt & Whitney, Henkel. We talked a little bit off air here about our mutual connections there at Pratt & Whitney. I'm sorry, at Henkel. And but anyway, and she's also again been at on the brokerage side. Very active. I've seen that she also has obviously a broker's license, but she's also a master custom specialist from the NCBFAA, which we all affectionately know as MCS, and very active with organizations like, of course, NCBFAA, ICPA, and I saw something on there, and she might correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I saw something on her profile about being also active with the OWIT, the Organization of Women in Trade. So, Diane, welcome. Yep. Diane, welcome to the show, and we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be on the show today and to talk about the importer broker relationship, because I truly do believe it's the heart of smooth, compliant, and cost effective global trade.
Well, one of the things that Diane, and welcome to the show. The thing that you're talking about there is the most companies have vendors. Obviously, well, everybody has vendors, but it's more than with a customs broker. It's more of an intimate business relationship, very similar to that of your tax accountant. It's a customs broker needs to understand what you're trying to accomplish and where you're going with that. But that's one of those things that is, like you said, vitally important. And so often things get pulled in at the last minute, and they're coming in going, "Oh, you can't really do that," or "What are you trying to do?" or whatever. But with that, why don't you talk a little bit from your perspective as far as what you're saying is the importance of your relationship with a broker? Should you have multiple brokers, or just stick with one, or what?
I think a strong an import broker relationship really consists of trust and being able to have guidelines paved out for them, such as SOPs, escalation paths, some background in terms of the product itself. There's no real limit in terms of how many you can have, but I do believe that when you have multiple, it can be more challenging. And then also when you're switching frequently, right? Because we can't think about it as just another vendor. It's more of like a strategic relationship that we're creating for ourselves within the company. And they should really be part of the trade strategy that's being created in terms of in the trade program.
Well, excellent. It's with that. Do you look for, when you was like with Aura's one, obviously your past relationships? I mean, especially if you're in a large organization, there's a lot of people, a lot of interaction, and all of that. So, in the role there, especially if you've got basically a 724 type of operation of supplies being brought in, goods being brought in, shipped out, whatever. No one can keep up with that 724. So with that, do you look to see about having, or how do you look to establish maybe a main contact to navigate both within your own company, but within, they can help in navigating within their company as well?
Yeah, I noticed a lot of times when there are broker relationships, they're the entry writers or the people that are really the front men, so to say, doing the actual work. And then there's also the account reps, which are just as equally as important. But I think it's important to have relationships with both, including the people who are doing the day in and day out, because those are the ones that are putting the classification codes, checking to see if country of origin looks accurate, valuation is correct. Those are the ones that you really do want to connect with and have those relationships with, where they can spot out a red flag just because they understand more of your product and your business, and they are more willing to call, whether it's, or leave a message, whether it's 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night or early in the morning. Where the account rep is really just there to provide support, to actually ensure there are the people who are our front lines there to support you, and to facilitate quarterly business reviews, ensure that they provide metrics. So I think between both relationships, you get, meaning the entry writers and the actual account reps, there's two different parts that you'll get from each of them.
And you've worked with large companies. I mean, Pratt and Whitney
Yeah.
and Henkel are not, and Amazon, they're no small companies, but you're also with the smaller companies. I'm not saying Aura is a small company, but in comparison to those other ones, they are, so you've been working from maybe a large team to a very small team, and something in between. What do you feel like some importers underestimate, I guess, in that task that a broker tends to do that may not be appreciated by, a common
Yeah.
importer. I mean, we're going to see that a lot coming after this Friday, after this show airs on the 28th of August, and on the 29th, tomorrow, everything goes away for de minimis. So a
Oh,
lot of the
yeah.
small importers are going to suddenly have a realization like, oh my goodness, now I need a broker, right? So, but like, what do you see is like people underestimate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that they don't realize the work that is done in terms of that. They really are checking that every shipment is aligned with the customs regulations. Again, that the classifications are accurate, the valuation is correct, country of origin. They're they're minimizing the risk for every entry that goes into the U.S. on your behalf. Um, but it's also important to be that strategic partner with them, because at the end of it all, the importer really is has the onus in terms of what's compliant and what is being entered. It's the importer's responsibility to manage that relationship, to perform audits with the broker, and to ensure that they are providing the most accurate information. And when we don't, we leave things open where that they will make those assumptions on their own, and that's when there could be errors that we find afterwards.
As you are dealing with your broker, do you not want to, or do you look to empower your broker to, in the event that there's a situation, they need to make a call to go ahead and keep the freight moving?
I try to give my broker, when I'm dealing with the brokers, I make sure that I'm able to provide them the most up to date information. So, something that I'll put out there as best practice is to be able to share data proactively. I personally always share a database once a month with the brokers, making sure that it has the most up to date product SKUs, descriptions, whether or not anything has changed. And I have really tried to empower them to make those decisions in instances like you said, Andy, where it may be a Friday afternoon, they can't reach me or anybody on the trade team, but we don't want to stop a shipment. I encourage them to go ahead and clear for what they have or what they have used in the past, but then Monday morning ensure that they have a calendar invite on from with me, just to walk through it. And if there's a change that has to happen, that we do have that 10-day grace period where we can go make the post summary correct, not even post summary correction, I'm sorry, the
Yeah.
entry summary filing.
I mean, you're going to have, if you will, errors that come up, generally
Yeah,
speaking, but it's one of those where it's not if, but more of when, and what is your process? Do you talk through that process with your broker, on, if something goes awry, how to get things back on track?
absolutely. And that's also where the SOP comes into place. I'm big on that in terms of making sure that they have the guidance for the specific scenarios. And then when things do happen, because like you said, that's just not going to be able to be avoided completely. What is the escalation path? And then also SLA times, right? If they don't hear back from the first person of contact, who is the next person in that chain of command, who they should reach out to, just so that they can ensure that they keep the ball rolling. Something when I was at Amazon for 4 years, I've learned is a two-way door analogy that I often use. Being in compliance and working in supply chains that are moving really fast, it has helped me in terms of the thought process of how I can move and feel okay about it. Is if it's something where I can move fast, but there's always the ability to change it if it's incorrect, or if I can actually accept the worst scenario that could happen, then I'll make that move. And if it's not, then that's kind of where I put a block to it. And I try to share that with my support in terms of the brokers that I use and even the people within my team, because I think in compliance, we often get this analysis paralysis, where we want to ensure that we're doing the 100% correct thing. but as you mentioned, we will never be to perfection. So we have to be able to find some type of process within ourselves that can help to make that work.
So you bring up a good point, Diane, in that. So you have you have SOPs with them. You have just they're trying to make them adhere to the SLA, and I'm sure obviously somewhere in there you have a signed POA to them, right? A power of
Yeah,
attorney.
for sure.
But so with all that mix of everything, they're doing a lot of the work for you. Like, what is your advice, or what is your best practice, I guess, or your what is it that you do to maybe even audit your broker? Just to make sure
Mhm.
things are on the up and up.
Yeah, I advise for everyone minimum to have an annual audit for your broker in terms of the entry process, and even looking at some KPIs and metrics. But I personally recommend quarterly, which is what I do as best practice for myself. I remember when I was at Diageo, something that we did was we did have KPIs in place. Um, and we held the broker accountable for those KPIs, because if they fell below a certain point for a certain amount of time, that actually resulted in a different rate, right? And so that's kind of was a creative, I guess you can say, way to help um, motivate them to ensure that they're pushing forward. There's an incentive for them, and then as well for us, we had the metrics and KPIs that we could look at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, and look to see where we can do some process improvements. Where how many times did we not meet SLA on entry time, and for what entries was it a specific commodity that we need to go back, and then from there I would build out trainings or build out some type of protocol that could help to mitigate where we fell short.
Okay. And you were, let me ask you this, is that for our listeners, the SLA, you're talking about a service agreement there or what?
Yeah, the service level agreement. Yeah. So if we had agreed that it was 3 days, and then let's just say it came back at 5 days, how many of those entries came back at 5 days? And there would be a threshold, right, in terms of if it fell below that, that we need to revisit our contract. We need to revisit our rate.
Well, and one of the things, though, too, is that in looking at it, what I have noticed, whenever there's a delay, it usually will show up as a symptom, if you will. It'll show up as a delay in, you've got a customs delay process or something like that. And 99% of the time, either the commercial invoice or somewhere along the line, there's a deficiency of information. And when you track
Yeah.
that down, it's
Yeah.
actually within the company. So, in other words, as you're going through and you've got your piece of it, your
Yeah.
sourcing folks or purchasing folks didn't send certain data elements that should have been included with the purchase order, or the transportation folks didn't set up certain things for pickup notices or arrival notices or different things, and tracking that down, or whatever the case may be. Again, it may be a case where the manufacturer didn't put in the right part number, or even if they put in a harmonized tariff number. I mean, here's one of the things I always challenge compliance people with. Do you trust the harmonized tariff numbers that are on the commercial invoice that comes from the shipper? 99% of the time, I always, oh, absolutely not. And I'm like, well, then why not? Because you haven't gotten integrated into your process here. Now, it takes a while to get there. I get that.
Yeah.
But as you're looking through that, that's the one thing is, I think what you're saying is, in my point, you have a quarterly broker review. You see cycle times have gone from 3 days to 5 days. You have to ask the
What
question,
happened?
why? It
Yeah.
may not be the broker. The broker's doing all they can. They're just not getting what they need, right?
Yeah.
So
Most times out of not, it is the case, because, I mean, let's think about it. People are just not gonna, not perform for the most part,
right.
as they had agreed. So it does tell the story, and that's why I said I think it's a benefit for both partners. Is that for us, it tells a story of what's actually happening, and actually looking to do root cause analysis and then process improvement.
When you do your quarterly broker review, do you include people from your purchasing group and your transportation, logistics, and warehousing groups?
I do include the leads for
Mm-hmm.
those departments.
That I was going to say it's important for
Yeah,
everybody to have a piece of it because everybody feeds into this beast, and the brokerage
of
piece of it
course.
is just a symptom, or not a symptom, but a piece of it. But usually that's where, if things go well, nobody is like, okay, everything's going fine. But if it doesn't go well, that's usually where it surfaces, right?
Yeah,
And you don't want to put
yeah,
the broker or your compliance team immediately on the defense. It's like, well, let's just look and see why. I like how you're saying, well, what happened? Let's look at it and start breaking that down and going from there. So,
yeah. Story that when I got my first position as in trade compliance, my very first position, and mind you, I took my customs broker license as a bet. I was working in logistics, didn't need to have a customs broker license, but in conversation, somebody had told me I would not be able to pass it. So, long story short, I ordered the books and studied for 6 months, passed them my first time, and then realized, hey, I need a career now that goes with this license. My first position was with DHL Global Forwarding as on-site customs brokerage at Diageo, which is the alcohol manufacturer of some products that you probably are aware of, Johnny Walker, Smirnoff, and whatnot. Uh, the the account was not in good standing at that time, and mostly because there was a lot of turnover within DHL, so that they were getting different national account managers and whatnot. And to kind of alleviate that frustration and build trust, they offered to have somebody on site at Diageo, including working with the national account manager remotely. That was me. Um, Young, inexperienced in terms of trade, but walking into kind of what I thought of the lion's den at that time, because you know, the the importer was frustrated. And the first thing I did was really just try to build relationships and showed a sense of humility to say, hey, I'm here now. I understand you're frustrated. What can I do to help make the process better? Where are your frustrations lying? Where are your pain points? Grabbing a cup of coffee with them, having lunch with them, uh, learning their product inside and out, and then building out trainings for the entry writers. And within a year's time, between the national account manager and myself, we really turned that account around. Where DHL said, "Hey, I don't think we need the onsite anymore," and Diageo stepped in and said, "We're going to hire her." So they actually hired me as part of their team, on their customs and trade team. It was pretty cool, because then when I was on that side of the fence, I managed the DHL relationship, given the fact that I kind of knew the people and tools and systems.
excellent. Excellent. So, as far as in looking at this, what would you say would be some of the biggest challenges or questions that you come across as an importer when you're dealing with your broker?
The two biggest challenges that I see is communication, and then the quality of the data. Uh, the quality of the data really lies on the importer. It's our onus to be able to provide them the most accurate, up to date data that they can work with. And then the communication really ties into, you know, bringing the broker on board when there are product launches, where there's supply chain changes, even within the trade strategy. There's so many of us now within the tariffs exploding, that like we're changing our strategy internally. And so having the broker have a seat at the table, giving the broker a seat at the table, is super important, so that they can be a strategic partner with us. um, Again, I think there is a challenge when we're switching a lot, and then when we have a lot, when there are many or numerous brokers, just because it doesn't give the opportunity to create real personable, trusting relationships.
Well, when you have something that goes wrong, though, how do you track like the action plans, whether it was with the broker, with a department in your company, or whatever? How do you keep up with that kind of stuff when you're dealing with your reviews?
I personally use ACE. I go in through ACE myself. I know that the broker will provide me a report if I request it, but I like to go in once a month to ACE and I check to ensure that the data is actually accurate. And you're right, Andy. A lot of times there's something that we provided them that was incorrect, and I have to go back to whether it's sourcing or logistic to raise the question and say, hey, I mean, I don't know that anybody's intentionally trying to make a mistake here, but this is a risk. So how can we, if there's training, I'm happy to do that. But what can we do to put some guardrails in place so it doesn't happen again? Um, a lot of times, I want to say 95, maybe even higher, 95% or higher, it's not just the broker deliberately making a mistake. So it really is in terms of the data, circling back to the data quality and then the communication that we're providing them.
So really, from what you're talking about, and like auditing your broker, working with your broker, and having almost a symbiotic relationship with them. But so, like, as people are going to move into a relationship with a broker, and again, I insist on this again only because there's probably going to be a large population of companies now soon going into that. Don't always pick the cheapest broker, for example, right? I mean, just because they're the cheapest. But what kind of questions should you be asking your broker? What kind of what should you be asking so that you know that you are getting the best that fits you? Because again, I mean, it's not all brokers will fit you. Some are very specialized in some areas and some are not, and don't just take the first one that comes across, I guess.
Yeah, I think that the product itself, and I have not particularly dealt with too much of like produce or things that need to go back and like reefers that need to be refrigerated. But like if you're dealing with something like that, that's something that needs to be cleared quite quickly. You want to ensure that you're working with an experienced broker for that. You want to ensure that your broker has the experience of the not only your product but the region that you're shipping to. It's super important. I also would say to really understand their structure, how they have in terms of is it just one national account manager? Are there other entry writers? How many of them? Is it a 24/7 process? What are the hours of work? Um, what is the standard process in terms of when they have an exception raised to us? Are they going to email us? Are they going to put a meeting on the calendar to discuss? Really just understanding and questioning their operations and their specialization, and making sure that it aligns good with what your product is, and again, like what regions that you're going into.
Well, and one of the things too is you're looking at it is from, if you use your broker, most brokers now are tied in with a freight forwarder operation. So you have,
Yeah.
the both there. You can have air cargo, you can have rail, you can have truck, ocean, obviously, and all of that. So as you're looking at that, there's also companies. Siva Logistics, I was just sitting there looking at DHL's one, FedEx Expeditors, UPS,
CH
somebody
Robinson. Yeah.
that they have global operations. So in other words, if you've got business where you're looking at exporting from one country to another, into and out of the U.S. or into and out of other countries, not including the U.S., that's one thing to be able to align with them, just like what you're saying. And all right, who do I need to talk to as far as these countries?
Yes.
Can you handle that? It gives you, in a sense, one company to deal with, obviously multiple operations that they have. But do you recommend that kind of an approach, or do you want to go and set up a relationship in each of the different countries separately?
No, the brokers that I have come across, they do have offices and locations in Europe or Asia and APAC. So I I think that's very feasible, but it's still, you need to ask the question. So, for example, we have non-resident importer in the UK right now set up. And so we want to ship DDP. We have to ensure that with the broker, can you actually, is this something that you can clear for us on our behalf? And if not, what do you need? And in terms of the taxes, like how are those going to be paid? Because that's another thing, like ensuring that the broker, are they going to pay the taxes and duties on your behalf and bill you, or are they not? Or do you need to set up ACH with customs, right? These are just like the list of questions that you need to explore with them, and then think about what's the best fit for yourself.
And to that point, as you're evaluating maybe brokerage operations and as a vendor, a customs broker as a vendor and a freight forwarder, pulling in your purchasing, your transportation and logistics, and pulling in your accounting side, and more specifically, like the tax accountants.
Yeah,
Because it's okay. You need to look as you want to do tax avoidance if you can. That's legal. It's fine. It's strategy, or involve them from a standpoint that, yeah, you might want to do a DDP, and look at it. But, when you're paying the tax, especially in Europe, can you do the offset there, with
for the VAT.
for the VAT thing? I started to say GST, wasn't that? It was a VAT tax. All those kinds of things that come into play, and that works around the world. So, well, as we're looking through all this, I guess I would just say that, um, in wrapping it up, do you ever take your quarterly reports, or your annual reports, as you were saying, and all that, and come up with a summary and send it up to the executive leadership?
I have in the past. I have not done that in quite some time, but I do. I like the idea. I think it gives a great snapshot, and that's what I would send it as a snapshot of what's happening. Very high level. How many entries are we shipping? How much value are these brokers clearing on our behalf?
Mm-hmm.
Um, how much are we even paying the brokers to clear on our behalf, right? So giving high level information and data to senior management is something that could be very strategic, and I do recommend it.
Yeah.
Do you use that strategy or somewhat on your site to kind of help your management understand um, the severity of maybe what you may be dealing with now with like the current trade situation? I mean, again, Andy and I keep on saying, let's not say that it's bad or good or whatever. It's not. It is a trade situation that we need to be dealing with today. Regardless of how much work or less work it might be. It changes every 4 years, of course. Every time we have a new administration, things do change. But
Yeah.
how like, do you find yourself having to kind of explain that to management? And again, maybe not necessarily with your current employer, but even in the past when there were other trade challenges, even before, with other administrations.
Yeah, I do. I have in the past, and I do find myself even now, because we are facing the new norm. I do believe we are. And trade is no longer a backseat operation. It's really becoming a growth enabler. We are getting a seat at the table. We are at being asked in sourcing and logistics scenarios, what's the best situation in advance, way upstream. And so it's our job to really advocate for that and show leadership what the full picture is that we're dealing with, so that they can also make the best decisions within the company.
Yeah, and be able to, with the chaos, the frustration, with all of that, I would also say the compliance folks need to be able to convey a sense of confidence and going, yes, there's a lot going on. Some of this, we just need to calm down and just wait till the
Oh,
dust
yeah.
settles. Don't react to a tweet or a X or a Truth
Yeah.
Social or whatever necessarily. On the same token, it gives you an indication. You know what? I need to brush up or have some staff start looking into maybe a certain country that was mentioned and see what's going on. And do we have any trade in that realm and all of that? So, it gives you really an advanced warning in some respects. Others, you're having to react so quickly. The other side of this would be the systems and IT. They're going crazy trying to program everything and set up new things and all of that. So that's a challenge too, isn't it?
I have seen an extreme amount of anxiety across the board within all companies, within obviously the tariff changes and people wanting to figure out what are we going to do next, what's going to happen, even within my own trade network. And the truth of the matter is none of us have the crystal ball. And I really do believe the dust hasn't settled yet in terms of mitigation strategies, FTAs, exemptions. So it's not for the faint-hearted, I should say. We have to just be able to take a look at it, understand that this is happening, and have proactive approaches, right? I think we should start to scenario model where we can, and come up with things where if A happens, then we can resort to B. But it's still much very up in the air. So, and that also leads to why we should lean heavily onto those broker partnerships that we do have.
And to take from your former employer's brand, dealing with all of this, and my buddy over at MIC Customs, Joe, will appreciate this, but that is why Johnny Walker makes the blue, right?
No comment.
There you go.
No comment there.
Some people might need to look that up, but anyway, yeah, that's why they make the blue, man.
We always had the saying, like, we're not saving lives here if the shipment gets stuck and people don't get their alcohol.
I love it. Well, Diane, listen, we appreciate you being on our show. This has been some good information. Hopefully, folks, this will be something that's thought-provoking. And your insight's been really, really good. I would love to hear maybe at another show or something, maybe some actual stories of what you went through and had to overcome in some of this recent with these challenges and the trade. But the main thing is the company you're working for succeeding? Are they able to break through? And some of this, they may have to be changing sources for factories or for manufacturing because of some challenges in that realm. So anyway, thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, and I'd love to come back anytime.
And folks, listen, like our show, share it. We follow us, do all those kinds of things. We really, really appreciate you so much. It is the Simply Trade podcast has really evolved. There's multiple shows now, and our listenership keeps expanding. We thank you for that. But for now, we'll turn it back over. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.